Welcome, Jonas. Good to see you. I understand
Hey,
that you've
Rich.
got some kind of community building questions and things, and I've got opinions about them. So let me have it. What are you up against?
Yeah, excited to hear your opinions. I'm based in Vienna, part of the climate activist, climate justice bubble here, and also like in the community supported agriculture, like sharing economy, solidarity economy space. And I'm also connected to like a lot of self-organized cultural spaces, and the whole like self-organized education and like doing workshops and facilitation stuff around here. So there's a lot going on in all of those spaces, and I'm constantly thinking about how to like build more community within those spaces and to connect people in a more effective way so they can use all the resources that are there more effectively. Because one thing that is also very present is the sense of like we're doing so much and nothing's moving, and we're constantly fighting an uphill battle, and people are burning out and like dropping out and moving away. So that's not good. If people that are motivated by like a beautiful vision for like a livable environment, a livable future, stop doing that because the conditions aren't right for them to thrive while they're fighting that fight. So I've made a small experiment last year around the same time where I tried to like call together like this retreat and for people that that are active in those spaces in some way, because I thought it would be really cool to get a bunch of them to a place for a weekend, like people to meet each other that haven't met, and for like with some spicy inputs to like kind of guide the conversation in a certain direction, but not too much, mainly just like the way you talk about it as like a congregation starter, like a dating pool for people to meet and weave some social fabric. So that failed last year. I sent out a bunch of messages, and I think I know why it failed. I think I kind of was afraid to step into the lead with it. I was like, hey, I have this idea. Do you want to be part of it and like think about how we could do that together? And not much resonance came back. So it's like, oh fuck. Okay. And now after visiting your micro solidarity gathering, being part of that, I'm like, maybe it's okay if I hold that source energy for the first bit, and then we can see what comes after that. So what I'm wondering right now is like, what is an appealing invitation to people? Because there's also this this trend in the activist community around here that like anything with the label sustainable activism or like resilience or self-care is like, leave me alone with that. We got work to do. So it's like where I'm at right now is like, maybe there should be some content that I can put on the front, like put a label on it. It's like, this is about this topic that is interesting, that is not like so associated with touchy-feely self-care stuff that people are afraid of. And then through the setup of the event and like sneak some other principles in there. Yeah. And I'm wondering like what your experience is around like that process of like not being fully like putting it into people's faces what it's about. Do you have any experience with that?
This is so cool. I'm really glad you're doing this, and I hope it works. It seems really necessary. The Life Itself podcast, yesterday they published an interview with Carl Stayet, and they talked about this quite a bit, about like how do you, like a lot of especially like traditional leftist activists have such a focus on the material conditions, and the interior condition is seen as like a nice to have optional extra, and of course there's no way we've got time to really get to it, so it always gets deprioritized. And Kyle had a nice way of describing like, we can do both, like actually we can be more effective in whatever kind of protest action we're doing, or confrontational action, or what kind of thing we're doing, if we're more resourced internally, if we have more free awareness, more creativity, like more ability to like think laterally, that all comes from rest and restoration and having a better understanding of yourself. So I think it's a really important thing you're doing. A bunch of things come to mind immediately. I've just taken a couple of notes here to track them all. One is, I like what you said about how, like, your analysis of why the first attempt didn't really work, and now trying again. Something that I went through in a similar way. My conclusion of it basically was to invite people. On the invitation, it said basically like, this is the first time that we're coming together, and I'm willing to sort of hold it and design it, and like, this is what I have in mind, but it'll only be satisfying. Like, if we decide that we wanted to keep going, I would only be satisfied if it was co-owned. So like the subsequent ones, we expect to do it in a more participatory way if there's going to be a number 2, but we don't know if there'll be a number 2 until there's a number 1, some way of signaling that up front, just to say like, I don't want to be the dictator, but someone needs to initiate, blah, blah, blah. That helped me relax somehow, to put that in the document, the invitation document. The other thing that came to mind when you're talking about what's sort of the content that gets people in the door, even though there might be stuff underneath the content that you think is more valuable, but it's not going to be appealing to them. That just reminded me, I've had a model in my head for a long time now, where it's like, content it's like marketing. It's what gets people in the door. It's like, so for us, a lot of time, it's like collective decision-making. People want to know about decision-making. They know that they suck at it. But actually what they need is emotional intelligence and like a culture of feedback, and these kind of like more subtle skills. But if you just said we're going to do feedback training, people wouldn't come. So that's really normal, that you kind of have to think about what do people actually respond to. I've got to the point where I think the content is kind of irrelevant once they're in the room. The content's irrelevant. What actually matters for me, the model I have, is it goes like content, choreography, character. So like the choreography is just designing the interactions so that a lot of people are going to have meaningful encounters with each other. So there's like time on your own for quiet reflection, there's time in pairs, there's time in small groups, there's walking in nature. Like, what it's like to be a facilitator. You just design good process, and it kind of doesn't matter what content you put in. It almost doesn't even matter what people you put in. If the process is good, it just tends to produce good outcomes. So that that makes me a little bit flippant maybe with the content, even, where I'm like, who cares? But but it is needed, like, because all those people won't show up, or you won't get the right people showing up. And then the layer underneath the choreography is what I call the character. So that's like the subtle characteristics of the hosting team, what they're projecting into the room, I think is the main enabling or limiting factor of what happens in the group. So again, it's like, who cares what process you use, whether you're like drawing from open space technology or from Theory U or from something else. If you're all stressed and uptight and like projecting this urgency and uncertainty, it's really not going to be a good vibe for anyone. So it gets progressively more subtle, and people are going to be, when someone first encounter, all they see is the surface level, but actually it's the deeper stuff that leaves the impact on them, I think. So that's a puzzle that I've had to figure out. And so then the question is, like, we come back to the original question, what's the content? And what came to mind for me on that was, Lana Yelanev, she described briefly about nemowashi, this Japanese concept of digging around the roots. That's how I would design the content, is basically visiting with some people that I think are really close allies, one by one, and just saying, hey, I've got this vague concept. I don't know how really to describe it, but this is the outcome that I want. And just kind of throwing ideas at them and just noticing which words they get excited about.
Sticks.
And you start with the people that you trust the most, who love you the most, who want to support you the most. And then you gradually go around the circle until you get to some people that are a little bit more out of, you just don't know each other so well, or you don't have so much trust. And it's like a rapid iterative feedback loop process. After every conversation, the next one informs the next one, and then probably after 5 conversations, you'll have something that feels relevant. It's a job of like sensing the system. You're like a spider sitting on the web, tugging on these different strings, and you're like, oh yeah, there's a bug there.
Yeah, that's also where I arrived. It's like, okay, I can guess all I want, but probably I'll need to talk to some more people about it. Because also what I see from the outside is not what is going on inside of them. It's just my analysis and what I think would be useful. But yeah.
Well, what is your guess about what, if you just limit it to just a couple of people that we would just like, these people need to be there. Can you guess about what they might want to experience, or like what might draw them in?
So I think maybe it's about effective organizing, like both like kind of outreach kind of organizing and the internal, like how do we organize our movement. Yeah, and like the question of like how do we draw in more people and like put the whole movement on a more stable foundation. I think that awareness is there, that's needed. Yeah. And there's like strategy stuff is always like, oh yeah, we need like, let's do a strategy weekend. And that means sitting in a circle and talking for hours without a break, and like not really getting anywhere. But yeah, I mean, getting to the same points all the time. Like
yeah. So if it was, say, strategy weekend, something that people are familiar with, or effective organizing weekend, how would you signal to them that it's going to be strategy weekend but a bit different? Like what kind of, like for example, I'm thinking about what's that book called, Emergent Strategy, yes, so that's like, you can say we're going to be drawing on this body of practice, which implies a different approach to strategy than you might have learned in like corporate workshops. So yeah, like I'm wondering what kind of references you would draw on to help people anticipate that this is not going to be what they expected.
Yeah, I think if I were to choose strategy as like the content layer, then emergent strategy would be like a good way of framing that, because a lot of people are familiar with it also, like they've heard about it or even read the book, which is surprising. But yeah, that could be a way to say like, okay, I'm also sometimes thinking about this enrollment strategy with, I don't know if you're familiar with the metaphor of 2 islands, the island of here and now and the island of possibility. And when you want to be really enrolling with people, you have them describe what they're experiencing in the here and now, on the island of here and now, and then like what the island of possibility could look like. And then you make like a really, you tell them you're going to get them there. You're going to have them build the boat to take them to the next island. And I think that's also like a way to approach this, because the strategy has been so like painful. So it could be like, hey, these things are happening with the way we're approaching strategy right now. And this is what would become possible if we were to maybe try something different. And I'd like to invite you to the process of figuring out how that could look. Yeah.
Tell me, so, what could be made possible? What's different about it? Like because it's like you've probably got a feeling for it. It's in your muscles somewhere, but like you have to put it in words.
Yeah, I mean, feeling like living a fulfilled life while fighting that fight for climate justice, a livable future, and not burning out I mean, the island of possible, like, yeah, it's always good to put it in positive terms, but this one is so is so like present. Yeah. And yeah, just that, like what we experienced at the micro solidarity gathering, like being able to express a need and having it met by the community just by virtue of the social fabric and the relationships that are there, and not feeling like I need to like hold anything back because I can't express it, and the whole project is going to fail if I'm going to meet my personal needs, and feeling like people are going to think you're weak when you express that you kind of need to take a step back right now or need something different than pushing through. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
The one about a fulfilled life makes me think of like, maybe the mindset shift there is, you know, are we organizing for the next COP meeting, or are we organizing for the next generation?
Yeah.
And if it's a next generation thing, then the question is like, okay, well, how are we going to raise kids that we think are going to be set up for the future, you know? And that means like, what does it take to raise a kid? Well, it takes decades in a village. So putting that frame into the strategy, I think it's inspiring for me. I don't know if it will be inspiring for people that are really caught up in the sense of urgency. I know a lot of them probably are not having kids for this reason.
Yeah.
On the having your needs met thing, or not having to withhold, or like being able to disclose your reality, it sounds like the mindset shift there is like kind of an abundance thing of like, we're used to being under pressure and under resourced and racing, and your hypothesis is there's a way of relating to each other that actually unlocks a lot more resources that are already just living between us, and that for some reason we're kind of hypnotized by this idea that we've got to present a very strong face all the time. But if we allowed ourselves to like let the mask down, we'd find that those needs are actually quite easy to meet, because often it's like you need to have a walk or a cry or a dance, you know, like, and then it's done.
Yeah, I think that mindset shift from urgency to like more long term, that's super tricky, because there's so many like material arguments for the urgency that people can always be like, yeah, but this highway is being built right now. If we don't do something right now, they'll build it. It's going to be done, and then they're going to build the next one, because they've already built this one, and it doesn't make sense if they don't build the next one. And it's like, yeah, okay, I see that that's happening, and that's like, yeah, that's shitty, but still, like, what can we do to my sense in that is that to prevent what's happening right now, we would have had to start organizing more laterally and more deeply like 10 years ago. And maybe this is like, this battle is, maybe it's just lost. And maybe we're better off investing our energy right now in preparing for like the next thing that's going to happen, or the one after that. Because it's just like the kind of transformation that needs to happen is not right now, but it's going to take some time. But to get that into people's, like, I don't know how to present that in a way that is not super offensive to them, because they've been in that struggle for the past 1.5, 2 years, like full on. And
my hypothesis is that you don't have to present it to them, you know, like that you can create the conditions where they admit to themselves what they already know. And that's a consequence of having created psychological safety and a space for reflection. Like you don't have to push that, you know, you don't have to show up and be like, you guys are doing it wrong, and if you just listen, you know, obviously it's not how you actually think. But all of the activists that I work with, they carry a huge amount of doubts along with them, and usually they feel a huge fear of like admitting the doubts, or like I'm letting people down if I don't, like that I must hold the line. If it's not me, then no one will. We've got to hold this like clarity and confidence about we're doing the right thing. We know it's the right thing, and it's what shores up our sense of like purpose in the world or something. But as soon as they get into a context where it's safe to admit vulnerability and doubt and to grieve, then all of the stuff comes out, and there's a relief, because that's one of the masks that we're carrying around, is this like, oh, I know exactly what we need to do about the climate. We just need to stop the highway. It's like, well, you know what? You could stop all of the highways in Austria. And then what about the rest of Europe? And then what about the rest of the world? Like, it's, and everyone knows this. They know it at some level. But not being allowed, having a knowledge that you feel is not admissible, it's really a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy to withhold stuff from each other. And so like, if we can have a context where the withholding stops, it actually frees up all this extra energy.
Yeah. What I just thought when you said that, like creating a context of psychological safety where people can admit this to themselves, it's like, that's why I feel like it would be useful to have a more diverse crowd of people there and not just climate activists. Because if it's the same people that are used to going on the strategy weekend with each other and having really intense discussions about the next concrete step, then I feel like it might be a bit harder for them to let the mask down, because all of the peers are there and everyone's gonna think like, no, like once the first step is made, maybe it's easier, but maybe there's a bit more tension in the room. Whereas if there's like some self-organized culture people and like some education people, and then it's like that are having similar experiences with their respective fields, but it might be a bit more, I don't know, easy to relax into it.
I really buy that. I'm thinking about at the Micro Solidarity gathering in Belgium, after the first full day, which a lot of people found like kind of intense. I remember Ananta and Chris volunteered to like, we're going to go host a silent disco out in the orchard. And I went and joined it, and it was like, such a relief after all of this work. And I don't know any climate activists that are going to suggest that we should go have a dance, but I know lots of, like crypto people and burners and, festival people that would suggest that. And so I really buy this idea of having extra diversity in the room, because people bring their different strengths, and if like, if you have someone whose gesture is, hey, let's relax and party for a minute, like that's a great contribution, it's really effective.
Yeah.
It does bring its own challenges though. It brings some challenges having the diversity. So like, I'm in a group of, everyone's a facilitator. And so it's kind of really obvious why we're here. It's like, we want to learn more about facilitation and support each other and have collaborators and stuff. And then I'm in Spiral, and in Spiral it's like a real diversity of different skills and domains and everything. And it makes everything a bit more complex. People are like, why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? So I think if you're going to have diversity, then the purpose takes a little bit more work maybe to articulate why would you come? And again, like you can feel it. You're like, oh, that's the thing that I felt at the gathering, but that's not very clear.
That's very hard to communicate. To have like one sentence that makes sense to all of these different contexts, right? And it calls on something that's relevant for them.
I'm also wondering about like the scale that you have in mind, or like what's the smallest step in the right direction, or like how big should the first thing be, and how many people and all that sort of thing. Have you thought that through much?
I think if it's like, I think I would do it for 10 people. 15 would be like already great, and like my biggest dream would be 30 right now at this point. But anything in between is like awesome. And I've already talked to two very good friends of mine that hold a similar vision for change, that I would be really excited about like having on the hosting team. And I feel like that's also like the capacity we have for holding something, because we've never done something like that together, and 30 would probably already be pushing it a little bit. So yeah, something in that range.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always on the small side, right? Like the smaller, the easier.
Yeah.
Just the less complexity. And like, I'm even thinking, is there a picnic with 6 people first, which is like an afternoon, and you start like cooking up the idea with some people, and then 2 months later, there's actually 15 people or something that stay for a whole weekend or a long weekend, or, like kind of building towards that. And yeah, I found with organizing events, like for me, organizing for 15 people is like completely effortless and everything's manageable. And then once you go above like 20, then it's suddenly like the group is going to have some kind of like tensions, and which is fun. It's part of the work, but it just becomes more effort.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. Because part of me is also like, I kind of want to keep it small, and then there's this ambitious part, and it's like, what's going to happen if you only have like, nothing's going to happen if you only have 15 people there. It's got to be at least 20.
Well, remember at the gathering we had 5 hosts for 30 guests, right?
Yeah,
so that's like the kind of
true
leadership development that we're doing. It's like, Nati and I could have held that whole event ourselves, but that's about, we're at our capacity, whereas having 5 people there means everyone is getting to develop their own capacity a little bit. I mean, it takes the responsibility off me. It makes it a lot easier, but it also means that like Jocelyn, for example, is now much more equipped to host her own thing because she got to help with this one. So that pacing yourself is actually creating more opportunities for other people to develop their own leadership too.
That makes sense. Yeah, same principle, right? It's like create some space around the edges where growth can happen. Yeah.
What's coming up in the back of my mind, like this thing about slowing down, creating space. Do you know Bayo Akomolafe?
Sorry, what?
Bayo Akomolafe. He's so awesome. He's like a poet, philosopher. I think he's from Nigeria and he lives in India. And yeah, he's been on the kind of philosophical podcast circuit that I like to listen to. And he's got this line about times are urgent, so we must slow down. I'm thinking about that and sort of alongside Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy, that like maybe, depending on who you've got, but maybe that is the way to create the invitation, is you grab someone else's words, someone else's book or a podcast interview or a little article or something, and say like, this is kind of the framing document. So like if it was emergent strategy, there's a bunch of principles, and it's like, we're going to go and live those principles for a weekend and see what that does for our way of talking about strategy. I think referencing someone who has that kind of credibility and respect in the movement can be a way to kind of get permission. You know what I mean? It's not just you with your like weird thing trying to push everyone around. It's like, no. It's like, it's the front edge, it's like this known thing.
That makes so much sense. Because like, what would I know about how to how to do that? Like, who am I to tell everyone like, this is what you should do now to you should come to this event because I think it's a good idea. But when it's like, hey, you've heard about this, do you want to learn more about it and like try it out in practice altogether? And then it's like, I see how people would be more interested in that, maybe. Yeah. I'm wondering about like, because my hope is that like a more long-term thing is being birthed out of that first event. And I'm wondering what you see about like communicating that before, or like what to do to support that, because that's where I'm a bit foggy. I feel like if I say like, we're going to have this event hoping, and then we'll have a community afterwards, that is really like, that meets every 2 weeks or whatever, that could be a bit intimidating to people. and at the same time, like at the gathering or at the event, like how to support people to like want to do that, to want to keep engaging.
Yeah, it's challenging. My immediate instinct is just like, first of all, just invite them to the thing, just the one thing that's like, this is definitely happening, you know, it's concretely happening, and we would love you to join. But also, I think there's kind of a job for you to get clear on your own commitment and capacity. So like, for example, with the Inspiral community in Europe, when I decided that I was going to be one of the people that was going to help hold, you know, like be the source. I mean, I don't really like that source idea, but like co-source, you know, like be one of the people that's going to like hold this container. I checked first, like, do I actually have capacity for this? And made a genuine commitment, knowing that it was a priority and that it was going to take probably a couple of years. And my own commitment was like, I'm going to hold this until it feels like it can hold itself without me. And in our case, that basically took 2 years, a bunch of online organizing, and then 2 gatherings. And at the end of the second gathering, it was like so obvious to me that the community didn't need me in the same way. That the community had reached a stage of maturity where it's like, yeah, I've got something to offer, but you know, I've got maybe more context or more historical knowledge or more relationships than the average person, sure, but like it would completely live without me. And yeah, having anticipated that beforehand and then gone through the transition and felt it, and now like at our last online meeting, I even sort of named that a little bit to say like, I feel like I've been holding a special role and now I don't want to anymore, and I'm going to need your support to change my habits, you know, to change my role. Like, I think you having your own clarity on that, whether it's you individually or if you've got a couple of allies that are going to be willing to hold it with you, getting clear about that so that when you get to the end of the weekend, you can say, this is what's on offer. Like, we're at least going to have an online check-in every week, or whatever. There's going to be a Telegram group, and we're going to keep it active. Or I'm planning to host one of these gatherings every 3 months, or you know, like that. Providing that dependable contact, I think, is really, like, a lot of people they might be really excited and they might have a good experience, but they also will need reassurance. Like, are you actually is this going to be just like a cool thing that happened once, or are you going to stick around? Are you someone that I can trust? And it'll take a year, it'll take 2 years for people to really go like, oh, this is a trustworthy container. I can actually let my guard down here. You know, I wouldn't expect it to happen instantly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Be clear about like what I can actually offer to people afterwards. Yeah, I've been thinking like a very brief thought without knowing how much effort it actually is to organize it. The first one would be like do it twice a year, as like just offer it as a retreat thing so people can come back, and then I don't know what would be a good thing in between. Yeah, I think I need to figure that out. The other people that are on board already.
Yeah.
But I've like what I've been thinking about is I don't know if you were there at the micro solidarity gathering. There was this one night where there was you guys had a plan, but then you changed the plan to make it like the support circle night, and that was really awesome actually, where like everyone that wanted to offer support or wanted to receive support could come, and then did a quick round of like, this is what I need, or this is what I have to offer, and then people just mixed and matched and went off in pairs or triads, and something like that on a more regular basis I feel like could be really useful. Just like okay, I know on Thursday nights I can go to this park, and there's going to be other people there that need something or that have something to offer, and I can like try to see if someone's there that I match with. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that I think the in-between retreats thing is very context dependent, and so you just have to try a bunch of experiments and see what lands. People generally find it a lot easier to prioritize a physical gathering over any other kind of digital connections.
Yes.
But when you find the right digital connection, people stick with it. Like I said about Inspiral in Europe, that's been primarily digital, the community formation there. It's been really impressive because it's just kind of the right people with the right structure at the right time that it's worked. But then for a lot of other communities that would never work. So again, the rhythm's really important. So if you're going to experiment with Thursdays at the park, like hold it for 4 Thursdays or for 6 Thursdays or something, you know, and then really give it a chance for people to factor it into their life schedule, and then have a retrospective at the end to see, like, does this work? Should we do this every second week? Should we do it online? Like, yeah, give it enough breathing room to test if it actually works or not. And it depends a lot on who else is there with you. You know, like, I'm trying to think who told me this. Someone made it really clear to me, basically, that the reason a lot of these very, you know, this is a beautiful aspiration that you're describing. And a lot of these things start and they go well and then they fizzle out. And it's because your job is not getting paid, you know, like that you're so oriented, the people that do this kind of thing are so oriented towards generosity and compassion and care for others that they kind of like deprioritize their own needs. And it's like the household economics just don't work, you know, like, oh, I'll just volunteer 30 hours a month, and that's how the system works. And it's like, okay, that'll work for 6 months, but at some point it won't. So like, it's a real struggle, you know, like I've had this aspiration for the micro solidarity network to be a lot bigger and a lot more impactful. And there are moves that I could do that I think would like open it up to many more people, and suddenly the numbers would go from hundreds to thousands. But I haven't figured out how to sustain the core. So I'm not bringing in that many people yet. It's like gradually finding like, who are the collaborators that I can trust? So like Jocelyn, for example, is willing to hold a monthly call. Awesome. Like that's such a fucking awesome contribution that for her, it doesn't cost that much effort. But for me, it's like, genius. And that helps make the sort of economics of it more sustainable. But it's a gradual process, because if I didn't trust Jocelyn, like that just wouldn't happen, you know, like, and we've had to develop that context over time.
Yeah, I think that's also a trap that I need to be very aware of, is like not try to run before I walk, because it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, I can already smell it, like it's it's right around the corner, and let's just like go a little bit faster. But to like look at what's the smallest thing that we can do that's meaningful in this direction, and get really good at that, and then start building it out. Yeah, and it's
Well,
it's no, I just thought about like how we started this conversation around like the urgency in the climate justice movement. We're like, oh yeah, I know how this feels. It's like I can have compassion for for that. And I notice it's still present in myself as well.
Yeah, it's being beamed into us from all directions, like speed up. It's part of the reason I live in Tuscany. It's like it's a slower place. I'm getting much more feedback from the world that slowing down is the right thing to do, because things move slowly in this country. People are on island time.
Hello.
Hi, I think your connection just wandered off for a second, and I'm just happily talking to myself.
Cut out a little bit. Okay. Switched Wi-Fi networks should work again now.
Sweet. You were talking about urgency, and I was saying that it's not just climate justice, right? Like there's so many different sources. The culture is like beaming in urgency, and like you've got to hurry up.
Yeah.
It's just that capitalism is normal. And part of the reason I live in Tuscany is because I'm getting some more signals to slow down here. It's like things, I mean, this house this building that I live in is older than the country that I come from, you know. It's like, slow it down, buddy. Just zoom out a few notches. Just click, 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 click. Say, oh, right. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm in a town where they have been eating fish out of the river for 2,500 years that we know of. It's like, some things are okay, you know. Things are bad, but things are okay as well at the same time. I mean, it's really good to have those signals around me rather than all the like neon signs of like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Damn, that's so nice to have an environment where that is like built into the environment, or like it's evolved that way, and you're still connected to that evolution, and it hasn't been this cut of like, okay, now we're going to do things differently. We're going to think about how we do things instead of just do what feels right. Yeah.
Have you got, I wonder if it's useful to think for a few minutes about the economics in more concrete terms, like if you're going to have an event, if it's going to cost money, like
Yes.
how have you been thinking about that?
I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I feel like where I'm at right now is like, it would be cool to offer it for free if people couldn't attend otherwise, but like have it cost what it costs to stay there, and for food, like, I don't know, can be really cheap for a weekend. It can be 40-50 euros. There's a lot of like self-organized co-living things around Vienna that I'm somewhat connected to, where stuff like that can happen quite cheaply. So yeah, what I'm not clear about is like, would I charge like a ticket fee that will end up somewhere either with me or with some other cause, or and yeah, I haven't decided that yet. Or like, if my instinct is like, no, don't do it, and then like what I've learned through starting a coaching business is like, yeah, I kind of need to charge for supporting people because otherwise I'm just going to be talking to people all day and not know what I'm going to eat at night. So yeah, those are like two conflicting things. Yeah. Like one big doubt is like, what are people going to think? Are they going to think I'm just doing this to make money? Yeah, but there's ways around that. Yeah. I don't know if you can hear my roommates. They're having fun, I think.
I heard the slightest, it sounded like a baby, but
yeah. Everyone's in a really good mood today.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so yeah, that's that.
I think what comes to me is like, if it's really small, then yeah, it's like a bunch of friends going to a house for a weekend, you know, you just share the costs and you don't have to think about it. But the bigger it becomes, the more work it is for you. And I agree, like it's maybe not for the first time, but you do need to get paid if you're going to be able to prioritize this amongst your other commitments. And we've experimented a lot with different kind of creative ways of doing this, but the general principle we go with is like, offer a sliding scale so that people can say there's like an average price, and then there's a bit more and there's a bit less. And then there's also the small print which says, hey, if you'll be excluded by these prices, just let us know and we'll make it work. And the people who are paying a bit more are just subsidizing those. A lot of people are going to be in a context where they can afford to pay a ticket, which includes an extra few bucks for you, you know. The other thing is, you've got the question of legality as well, you know. So there's like the informal friends hanging out for a weekend thing, which doesn't matter. But then as soon as you cross a certain threshold, it becomes more of a formal, you need some infrastructure. And with Inspiral stuff, in the past, we've just run that through one of the companies in the network. So like our company, we do events, so it's easy for us to like run it through our books. Yeah. But for the next Inspiral gathering that's happening, I've set up a page on Open Collective, which is like precisely designed for this problem. It's really nice. And maybe like, I was surprised at how easy it is to set up. Like you could go and get it done this afternoon. It doesn't cost anything. Like they just take a percentage of every fee that comes in. But what you get in return is like, it's all legal, it's all squared away, and it's transparent. So it's obvious that you're not setting up so that you get rich, you're just saying like, these are the expenses, I'm going to pay myself this much, and everything's completely transparent. So like it could be, maybe not for the first thing, but if you're going to have a repeating cycle of events, there might be something to run it through.
That's a really great idea. We also have some, like in this network, there's a lot of associations and like groups that have legal entities where it's possible to do that. I've co-founded one of them, so I have access to that infrastructure. But Open Collective, I think, precisely for that transparency reason, is a great idea. Yeah.
I also had an idea which we didn't implement this time, but like if the economics had been different at the last gathering for micro solidarity, what I wanted to do was like take a percentage of ticket sales and put it in a common fund. And then at the end of the event, be able to say, hey, look, we've got 2,000 euros here and it's up for grabs. So anyone in the community can propose, and we'll have some kind of participatory budgeting process around how we spend this money. Like, do you want to make a series of videos or whatever, that economic solidarity can be really, really fun and really engaging for people, and like actually means they get to shift, people get to shift their livelihood to be more in line with the community. That's obviously a slightly longer down the track kind of thing. But it's an idea that I just want to keep percolating out there so someone does it.
Yep. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. It's interesting how that when you do that right with like the social fabric first and then slowly build towards that, it can be really fun. And if you do it too early, it's super stressful and everybody's like, shit, we're sharing money. I need to make sure that it's going to be used for what I want it for. Can definitely create tension. Yeah. I feel like I have a lot to digest right now.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. I'm wondering if is there anything else I want to ask you? Yeah.
Just if that's enough to digest, we can press stop there and we'll press pause and we can have another chapter, in a few months or whenever. Because if this thing becomes what you're dreaming of, it's going to be a long project, right? So I'm really happy to be alongside and help out in the ways that I can. Yeah, thanks so much. Even just for today and for offering that. It's really like calms my anxiety to know that I can talk to you about it. It's like, okay. Someone who has done this before also like thinks it's important and is willing to answer my questions. So yeah, it's a pleasure. Massively valuable. Yeah. I'm sure there's tons of people in the network as well that will also be happy to help you think it through at times. Like if you need to pull in a council of peers to like help you think through some details and stuff, I'm sure there'll be willing participants. Yep. Yeah, I think so. Cool. All right. That's awesome. I'm going to press stop here.